Welcome to the Music Room for January 1st, 2018. Happy New Year, everyone. Hey, there's been a lot of new subscribers to my YouTube channel over the last few months, and they may not really understand what the Music Room is about. Let's just kind of briefly look at this. So these albums on the wall, there are albums in there, but they actually represent photographs to me. So if I look at, this Willie Nelson Red-Headed Stranger over here, I think about my mother. Or if I look at, that Derek and the Dominoes up there, I think of my friend Alistair. And so it's not really about music per se or the artist or what's going on. It's more about the memory that gets conjured up whenever I see the album or I hear songs off of it. And we're going to continue that in the Music Room into 2018. And so I'm going to talk about photographs in general, not just album art, but actual photographs. I got a camera when I was 10 years old, and I really didn't learn how to take photographs until I was in high school. And I met a good friend of mine at the time. His name was John, and he and I took Yearbook together as a senior. And he later became a photojournalist, but at the time he was a really good photographer, and he taught me basically everything that I know about photography. And Yearbook, in order to do this segment, I had to go back and find a bunch of stuff, and so I found an old yearbook. I found my old can for developing film, and I found a bunch of these film cans. I found a bag of old negatives from long ago, and a bunch of photographs that we ended up taking for Yearbook. There were 3 photographers on Yearbook. There was John, myself, and a guy named Pat. John shot all the sports photography because that's really what he wanted to do. I shot candids as well as like group photos, the theater group called Oleans and that kind of thing. I got to do a lot of other things, but what's important to know was that you end up spending a lot of time in the dark room when we were doing film. It's probably 2-hour session or so. And it was 20 minutes for the film, and then you got to let that dry, cut that up, and then do the paper. So we had an old boombox in the dark room, and we would have a bunch of tapes to pick from. And this was 1981, so we were listening to Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Jethro Tull. What else did we have? That kind of thing. That's what I was listening to. And ZZ Top was out and well known at the time. But what John brought in was a lot different than that particular stuff. He'd listen to that and that was fine. But when it was his turn to put a cassette in, he put in a little something different. So he would put in he put in this album here. This is Rio Grande Mud by ZZ Top. This is a 1972 release. This is years before Trace Songbirds came out, and it turns out that this album, I've heard it so many times that this is actually my favorite ZZ Top album. And why I remember this one is because if I look at this, I think that a lot of these are really great songs, like Francine, Just Got Paid, that kind of thing. But whenever Apologies for Pearly would come on, John would dance around the dark room and do his little air guitar. So let's go ahead and put that on. It's the first song on side 2. And it's an instrumental that's a hopping song that's going to really show how tight ZZ Top really is. So now John was, he's a skinny white guy. Grew up in the middle of New Mexico, and it's anyway. There's 2 albums I have here. I'll bring up the other one in just a minute. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about John. So what he ended up showing me, I got a bunch of stuff written down over here. Is one of the things that he went over with me specifically is that you don't take pictures, you shoot photographs. And so that kind of set in with me was that photographers take photographs. And what I learned from John specifically is like all the photographs I've taken, all the thousands of photographs I've taken over the years, are all based on what he gave me instruction for in the darkroom there, while we were listening to Just Got Paid or Apologies for Pearly. So I looked at I learned about depth of field, exposure, lighting, fill flash. What else? Bouncing your flash, and more importantly, framing and cropping, as well as a lot of things about composition. And over the years, I have a particular style to my photographs based on what I ended up doing in La Loma, LA, the Hilltoppers Yearbook from 1981. And I can go through here and look at the photographs here and see ones that I did that were crappy and ones that I did that I'm really proud of. Let me see here. The photographs that I take, there's one particular style that I just can't really stand. That's what I call line them up and shoot them down, where people will line up in a a single file, maybe like a firing line, and then somebody runs over, takes the photograph, shoots it in. And I don't like those. I really don't have hardly any of those kind of photographs. I kind of make a nice composition or shoot at different angles and that kind of thing. And that's all based on John's input way back. So I looked all over the place. I found bags of photos, negatives, anything. And I was like, I don't have a picture of this guy. I looked through the yearbook and I said, wow. There's a picture of him in there somewhere. And there's a really crappy picture of the yearbook staff right here. I'll go ahead and blow that up. And John is over there on the upper left-hand side. And this was this was a selfie. So he'd set up the camera and it did a self-exposure. And I think we're done with that song, so I'll turn this down. So, I thought that can't be the only photograph I had. I mean, I was in a darkroom with him for like every day for a year. So looking around, and I found another one. And indeed, I was like, well, let me look at his class photo. So if we look through here at his class photo, I'll go ahead and show you that. Let me find him here. I'm protecting his last name. So here he is. This is him. I'll go and blow this section of the page up. So that's him there, and it turns out that he didn't really get a class photo taken. I shot this in the darkroom, and so his photograph in the yearbook is actually one that I took, and I'll show you what I ended up looking like, because we had to develop that and get it done that day, because the yearbook was, the guys out in the front of the yearbook class was looking for his photo. So here's a picture of me about the same time. I looked a little bit different than I do now. All right, that's not why we're here today to talk about that Rio Grande Mud. It's one of my favorite albums. It's actually a completely different style of music. So let me turn this off. And we will put on the second album, which was John's other passion in high school. This is Funkadelic. Cosmic Slop is what this is. And I actually looked for a long time to find this on vinyl. I found it on eBay. And this album is in excellent condition. I'm going to put on Nappy Dugout. You may or may not have ever heard this, but let's go ahead and put on Nappy Dugout because it's got some funky grooves. So John would come into the darkroom and he would want to play Parliament or what else did it? Oh, Parliament, Funkadelic, or any kind of funk from the 70s. He'd put in all these funk tapes. Now he's like a skinny white guy, middle America. And so for those of you who don't really know about funk, there was funk, then there was disco, then there was rap and hip hop. But back in the early 70s, there was tons of funk coming out of Detroit and the inner city. And somehow, I have no idea how in New Mexico John was able to get exposure to this, but he had a lot of these albums. And when I think about him, basically a lot, because I'll see, let's say I see a 35 millimeter camera, or or I take a photograph and it kind of reminds me of being on Yearbook. I think of John and I was like, oh yeah, that guy liked Funkadelic, so I had to look for this. So when I go around and look at the photographs, or not the photographs, the albums on the wall, I got to take one of these down, and I definitely have to put up Funkadelic. So over the years, one more. John will always be talking about this guy named Bootsy Collins laying down some funky groove, and he put this on. I'm like, this kind of crap. I didn't want to listen to it because that was like a hot rocker in the early late 70s. I didn't want to. I wasn't interested in this, but it turns out this is awesome. All the funk stuff from the 70s is great tunes. And it really does. That Bootsy Collins does lay down a tasty groove. So I looked up how many photographs I've taken. So online I have about 25,000. Those are all in my my online volumes of those images. And then what else did I have? Oh, down underneath the table here, I got about 2,000 more photographs of, before digital cameras came out. So it's pre, I don't know what is that, 1990, it's about 2,000. So all my photographs from high school and college days are on either negatives or prints. And so I got those down below, and I'd like to scan those in. And Picture of the Day is something I've been doing since about 1997, or 99 actually. And I've done, if I looked at the count there, there's 11,000 photographs in Picture of the Day. So it's like a documentary of various things. And I've actually learned that there's a thing from Amazon that actually will go in and classify these by objects it finds in the photographs. And I'll be able to find individual photographs a lot faster. So I'm going to be in the process of going through that this next year as well. Well, I lost contact with John. He did go to photojournalism school at MSU, but the program down there wasn't very good. So he transferred to OSU, and I kind of lost contact with him. This was early 1980s. No email, none of that kind of thing. You'd actually have to use a phone or God forbid, write a letter. So I don't know. I didn't know where he was, and I kind of heard about him moving to Marietta, Georgia. And he was working on a newspaper, I think, in Marietta. And then I think the last time I talked to him was probably at least 10 years ago. And so I kind of been poking around trying to find him because, this is a story about my memories. And I want to thank him for teaching me how to take all these photographs, because as my memory fades, the photographs become more and more important. Well, I did. I found him about 2 months ago. And then I started my hunt for the Funkadelic album, because you got to talk about Bootsy Collins and Funkadelic if you're going to talk about John. He's an elementary school teacher in Cobb County, Georgia. And I found a photograph of him with all the other teachers there at his school. Let me take this off. Found a photograph of him. It clearly stands out just like he did in our yearbook photograph. So anyway, that's the music room for today. I'm gonna definitely replace. I think I'm gonna have to take down one of these other albums. I'm gonna have to put up Cosmic Slop here because I got thousands and thousands of photographs of my life and all the family that I have and all my friends based on a year that John and I spent in a dark room and shooting photographs for our yearbook in 1981. That's the music room for January 1st, 2018. Hope the year is great for you guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.